My daughter died to medical malpractice, a failure in the system, and my family being misled. This is a story about my daughter Taylor, who was born with hydrocephalus, which is water in the brain. 2 days after birth, a straw-like instrument was inserted into her skull. It was like a drain that dissolved fluid into the bloodstream. On that fatal day, September 30th, my daughter wasn't feeling right, so my wife called a pediatrician to get her advice and told my wife to call the hospital. And when my wife called the hospital, more or less the physician just blew her off and told her to wait till Monday, which my wife didn't like the response. Called back the pediatrician and told my wife to just bring her right in there. It was on a Friday night. I was at work. I got a call late at night saying to come in because they're going to be performing surgery on my daughter. During that time, they did tests, and they found out that my daughter's shunt was blocked, so it was building up fluid into her brain. When I was brought into the emergency room, I saw my daughter over to the left. Didn't make a sound. She was getting an IV right into her arm. The resident came back at that time and said, "We got good news and bad news. The good news is she's going to have surgery. The bad news, she got bumped." And we asked why she got bumped. Who's more important? She has a brain injury. They told us that the operating rooms were booked and they were busy. Well, I now know, and I have evidence that's not true at all. They had several opportunities to come down to save my daughter's life, but nobody ever attempted to give her aid. They brought my daughter up to the room, and keep in mind the fluids keeps on building up and getting pressure into her brain. At 2 o'clock in the morning, she called out for help to her mother, calling Mama. And to me, she knew she needed help. The resident took a blood test that came back critical that nobody ever read, carbon monoxide levels, and her health was deteriorating. And during the night, the pressure was building up, and at 6:10, the anesthesiologist came in to talk to my wife. When asking her questions about the surgery, the alarm was, the heart monitor was going off. Didn't even look at my daughter. My wife said she's okay. Looked at the heart monitor, looked at my daughter. Oh, she had a slow heart rate during the night. So when my wife got up, they looked at my child. My daughter was blue. So the anesthesiologist called out to the nurse at the nurse desk. She came running in and told the anesthesiologist to press the red button, which is the cold button. And he goes, "What red button?" He didn't even know where the cold button was at. So my wife called me at her mother's house. I was babysitting my 2 boys. I don't know how I did it, but I rushed over to the hospital as fast as I could. And I remember rushing up to the floor and seeing my precious angel on the floor getting worked on with the ambu bag, trying to get oxygen in her lifeless body. They brought it down for surgery. They called in a physician that wasn't on call. They called him in. The surgery only took 45 minutes. 45 minutes to replace her shunt. After the surgery, he came out to explain to us we had to wait 72 hours for the brain swelling to come down. And we started asking him questions. Where was the attending physician? Nobody had any idea where he was at. We kept on asking him, where was he? And we asked the resident, which he couldn't make the decision, but he left a junior person in charge. My wife said you should have operated him on last night, where he responded earlier that my daughter would have been fine, would have been home by Monday. And we were talking, and he was telling us that this hospital failed us and we have to change our policies and procedures. They brought my daughter up to the 5th floor. My daughter was in a coma for a week. And as you can see, they took a vibrant baby from me. They took her away from me. And I saw seizures, opening her eyes, closing her eyes. And I tried to do everything, pitching her toes, squeezing her arms, grabbing her fluffy bottom, but her bottom was like mush. And we had meetings during the week. One of the meetings pertained to my daughter had 98% brain damage. And we had to make a decision, because they told me my daughter would have been a vegetable. She would have had tubes, feeding tubes, breathing. And I had to make a decision if I wanted to take her off a life respirator or not. This went on for a week, and on a Thursday, we had to tend to my two kids, and my son was playing hockey, and after the hockey game, and we're putting his hockey bag in the car, and he asked his mother if Taylor's ever going to come home again. And then right then I made a decision. It was the most powerful, painful decision I had made in my life, that I couldn't put my two boys through it. So that morning I called over to the hospital and said that we made the decision to take my daughter off life support. And during the morning, we met with the persons for transplants, and I pleaded, no, this is a healthy baby. Please take these transplants, take her hearts, take her lungs, take anything that you can possibly can and save another child's life. And due to the fact that she had 98% brain injury, she couldn't. But I do know that her heart valves were used in Virginia and Massachusetts. And during the afternoon, we took her off life support and gave her morphine. My daughter fought for 3.5 hours for the right to live. She was breathing, turning blue. She would give another gasp, stop breathing, turning blue and gasping. She did this for 3.5 hours. She fought for the right to live. And when my child finally passed away, my two boys came in and said, "Love you, Tay-Tay." And I told my wife to take the boys and take them downstairs, and I want to make sure they handle my daughter correctly. So the lady from the morgue came up, excuse me, and she had the morgue tray, but it was small for my daughter. Said she had to get another tray. And I said, "That's okay. We'll just wait for security, and I'll carry my daughter down to the morgue myself." And I saw my daughter get wrapped and tagged, and I had a couple of moments to her, and I apologized for her, letting her down. And I was very sorry. And I promised her changes. And I carried her down to the morgue, and I promised that I was going to make society better. And I was mad with the man upstairs for a while. It got me a long time to get over it. But I think God took my special angel to make this world a better place. Now, after the funeral and the wake, my youngest son went back to school, and he told his mother that he had a great idea. He wanted to take a Band-Aid off Taylor's head and bring her home. But get back to the physician, the attending surgeon. The reason why they delayed surgery, he should have been on call at the hospital. He went grocery shopping on company's time, put his pager on vibrate, went home, fell asleep, and then didn't answer any of his pages. The chief resident was on his way into the hospital, but once they couldn't find the attending who was in charge to make the shots, he never showed up. And they left a junior person in charge to call the shots. It took me a long time to get over it, and I promised my daughter that I was going to make change, and finally, after 3.5 years, I did make a change in honor of my daughter. I got a law passed called Taylor's Law in Massachusetts to give victims a voice. Because in most states, victims do not have voices when they go to the Board of Registration of Medicine. You're totally shut out of the system. And that's one thing I promised my daughter, to fulfill that promise, that I want your loved ones, your constituents, my extended family here, to get Taylor's past law, and like Amber's law and Megan's law, because they do need a voice. They do not need to be shut out of the system. And I wrote a couple of letters to the president, asking him to meet me about this issue. And my philosophy is, you should be the president of the people and not special interest groups like medical companies, AMAs, medical device companies, and drug companies. And the last thing I would like to say, Mr. President, my family and the families gathered here today, our family's pain and suffering are not frivolous. Thank you.
Thank you so much.